Hey everybody, I'm Greg Sowell and welcome to another CIQ tutorial. Yeah, not a demo, but a tutorial. So in this one, I'm going to be talking about nested loops inside of Ansible. So this one can be a little bit tricky. It was sort of weird for me the very first time around. Hopefully this one will be short. I always say that, or at least I always think it, and they always tend to be me just rambling on. And look what I'm doing right now. Anyway, I digress. Let's jump in. So loops can't be nested very simply inside of Ansible. It's not a programming language. This is what folks keep reminding me. So there are a couple of tricks that you can get around it. And so I wanted to do just a little quick demonstration to show you how that works. So I've got two little playbooks, or actually I've got one playbook and one task file. So in here, you can see it's not very complex. So this one, really what I'm doing is I'm just connecting to localhost, which is going to be the container itself, right? So when I launch this, it's going to launch inside of a container because I'm using an execution environment. And it's just going to look for all the users here. So if you look at the very first task, you can see that I am just catting the password file, and I'm grabbing all of the usernames and I'm saving those into a variable named users, right? And registering that to users. So whenever you see the register parameter, task level parameter, it's taking all the output, saving it into a variable. Well, the very next one, I'm doing a loop, right? So I'm, just the standard loop keyword. You can see it here, and I'm looping over users.stdout line. So you have just regular stdout, and so that'll kind of be like one line. It'll have all of the output there, and then stdout line tries to find natural line breaks, and will actually kind of give you a list that you can iterate over really easily. And so that's what I'm doing here. But you can see for the task itself, what I'm doing is I'm doing include_tasks, which will take a task file and it will run all the tasks inside of said task file. So to do a nested loop, I can't just do a loop inside of a block, and then, a block inside of that. You can't do it that way. What you do is you run a loop and you call a task file that has an additional loop inside of it. Bob's your uncle, you're good to go. So in here, you can see I have loop, right? I'm doing users.stdout_lines, but I have some extra options here, loop control. And so loop_var, I'm making that current_user. So by default, whenever you have a loop running as it's iterating through the data that's being passed back, right? Kind of the contents of that variable, it's coming back as a variable named item. Every single time it'll be item. Well, the loop_var allows me to change that. So instead of being item, it's current_user. Most of the time in my loops, I just leave it as item, unless you're doing a nested loop. Because think about it. If I'm returning a variable as item, and then I've got another loop that's trying to return a variable named item, those are going to kind of collide, right? You're going to have problems there. So your outer loop, at least, it's generally the way I do it. The outer loop at least should have a different variable name there. I mean, you theoretically could do the inner loop with a different variable name. For me, I like to have it as the outer. That way I kind of know, hey, this is something different. It's special in some way. So anyway, I digress. We're looping through. So for each user, right, that it returned here, it's going to iterate through. You can see I have something commented out here. So I had a little match _user variable that I created right here. And I said, hey, if the current user I'm going through, or rather iterating through, it's not one of these two, then just skip it. All right, just to kind of narrow down the data when I was doing some testing. So it's kind of a nice little conditional. If you haven't used one right there, you can actually have a conditional that's looking for, hey, does this match anything else inside of a list? It's a pretty cool trick, right? It helps you not have to have multiple lists, or rather multiple iterative loops. You can kind of do a little bit of tricks here and there. But I digress. It will loop through and say for whatever the very first user is, it will call this inner loop task file right here. So in this one, quick commercial break. So here at CIQ, we absolutely love helping customers build their automation environment as well as their automation practice. We have also become experts in migrating from one flavor of enterprise Linux over to another. I think you know which one is going to be my preferred for you to move to. So if you need help with enterprise Linux or migrations or automation, please give us a holler. Plus, Jimmy's getting bored and he tends to get really annoying when that happens. So I genuinely need your help to keep him busy. So drop us an email. To give the example of a loop within a loop, right here, I have an additional loop for the TSS user, right? So it happens to be TSS user. what I'm doing is essentially finding all the files that it actually owns and just looking for permissions on those, right? Like show me all of them, right? So I have another loop inside right here. So this one right here, you can see that I am looping through in setFact, and I'm kind of building a variable out that's going to have all the extra files that are associated with it right here. And you can see I'm not doing any variable name changing, so it's always going to be returned back as item. And so here I'm building the show file permissions, and I am just kind of adding onto itself, or essentially concatenating additional entries onto it to make it longer and longer as it goes. So that's for that specific user, but for all users, right, it doesn't necessarily have to be a loop within a loop for this. I'm actually getting the count of all of the files that happen to be owned by said user. That's right there. And then I'm creating a total file where it adds all that up to a big total, so you can kind of have one variable that's got all of those entries in it for whenever it comes back to this. When it's complete with all of the loops, it will just display out the total number of files for all of said users. And like any good baking show, I've already baked one for us here. So over here, you can see that it's going to start out with the outer loop. So I'm looking at all of the users, or rather I'm creating a list of all of the users, right? It goes from root to user 1000. And then it's going to be hitting that, that loop that we'll call the task file. And so it's just going to be going through. You can see a lot of skipping because there is a conditional block in there, right? Looking for the TSS user. And so none of these are the TSS user. So really all it's doing is it's passing that block. And at the very end, it's creating the overall account, like how many files does this user own? And then it's concatenating it to the end of that variable. So you're going to see that over and over, but instead I'm going to skip to the very bottom where all the information is. I'm scroll just a little bit, and here's our TSS file right here. So you can see the results of our nested loop, right? We had a loop called the task file. Inside the task file, we had an additional loop, and you can see all of the file permissions for everything owned by the TSS user right there and available. Well, let's skip to the very end just to have full completion there. You can see all the users that own files, and here is the count for them. So as you can see, doing nested loops isn't that difficult. It's just not exactly straightforward, not maybe 100% the way you would expect it to be, or at least it wasn't for me. Now that it's not that complex, you can actually go even further down the rabbit hole. So imagine I have a loop, right, for include task. It calls a task file. Inside of that task file, if I needed to go inside of yet another loop, I could, or rather nest the loop even deeper, I could do the exact same thing inside of that task file. I could have a loop that calls an additional task file, and you can keep going down the rabbit hole that way to nest deeper and deeper if you need to. So if you have any questions or comments, you would tweak or tune this, you could see this being used in your environment, or you've used it in novel ways. I would love to hear it. If you're interested in some additional support for your automation environment, we do have Ascender, our enterprise automation platform here. We also have some supplementary tools like Ledger that pulls all this logging in together, parses it, gives you great information, all the facts, all the changes that are happening in your system, all the packages, right? You could do errata, you could see packages added, removed, services, baselining, all that good stuff. And guess what? You can also do reports and alerts. So please reach out. Love to hear from you. Happy nested looping, happy automating, and if nothing else, we'll see you next time. Bye.